Well, well, well. All right, folks. Get started a little bit differently this time. We're dropping the persona this week, and perhaps for a little bit. Maybe we'll keep doing that once things start to settle into the craziness. Welcome to Escaping Dystopia. This is episode 93. It's March 19th, 2020. The lockdown begins. My name is Wah. I'll be your host this evening. Well, I've had some interesting conversations over the last few days as the news around the world has accelerated pretty significantly. Again, folks, feel free to say hi if you would like to. We're going to start this week with just kind of a little bit of a rundown on some of the places on Spaceship Earth. We're seeing now that we are indeed a shared ship and a shared space and a shared species. And we're dealing with something here that's a little bit different, at least for most of us who are alive now. The significance of this is kind of hard to really grasp, and it's taken a few days, and I think people are still in a little bit of shock. And a lot of folks who have... What's up, Tisa? Good to see you. How you doing? You guys doing all right? I think a lot of people are still in shock on far as what happened because of the quickness with which things have changed. And they're going to keep changing very fast, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that tonight. But on an update on the world, places where this is starting to get out of control. Italy, of course, as you know, has been on total lockdown. Yeah, how you doing over there, Susan? I heard things have not quite gone crazy there yet. But Italy slowed down. Iran is out of control too. The U.S., I think we're about a week away from things getting really, really difficult here. We'll talk about that. South Korea and Southeast Asia, it actually has just started. The Philippines. We have the company that I work for has a call center in Manila that has closed down completely as they've started to lock down the country. Indonesia, Malaysia. A lot of the places in Southeast Asia, and you've seen kind of a slower spread of the virus where it's gone very quickly into big international places, France, Spain, Italy, New York, the West Coast, the ski resorts here in Colorado. Currently in Colorado, that's where I am, by the way, the infection rate in the mountain counties is about 10 times what they're finding right now in the cities right now. They've already kind of issued a shelter-in-place order for some of the mountain areas. For folks trying to drive through the country, understand that a lot of places you'll be driving through, if you go through the mountains, are going to be closed. People are still, people are not quite adjusting yet. I literally talked to somebody when I was walking around yesterday. Was it yesterday? Today, Thursday? And he was on, and I mentioned this, and I think there's a little bit of motivated reasoning for some of this stuff that's going on around the world. I'm going to go ahead and move right into the next topic, which is our president versus this virus. This has been pretty wild to watch as he's changed his tone. Excuse me. Yeah, I've got a cough. Over the last couple weeks, going from that, it's a Democratic hoax just trying to hurt me, to now going full on. And some of the things that are happening are really... So, it's very clear that we're wildly unprepared for this. And the main focus now is going to be to deflect blame. And that's what a lot is happening in the press conferences, and we'll talk a little bit about more of some of the specifics of that. But it's becoming clear now that across the country there's going to be a huge issue. We've moved so far beyond the idea of even trying to contain or identify people who are sick. We got, like I said, and I've been telling people, we got a note from our doctor that said, if you're feeling sick and do that, we're not going to test you because we can't. The numbers that we're seeing, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, are way lower than what's out there. And we're going to see that this next week. This is why the whole Chinese virus thing that the president has been pushing, to be very clear, this is a coronavirus. It was given the official name of COVID-19 by the scientific community to specifically avoid some of this stuff. And to be clear on that, one of the reasons you don't want to add more difficulty in adding the racist element to this whole conversation doesn't help resolve it. What it does is shifts blame. And it shifts blame by using words. And this is a big thing that our president does. And this is one of the things that's so horrible about the approach here. Because the idea now is if mommy or daddy dies from this, it's not going to be the coronavirus that did it. It's not going to be COVID. It's not going to be a disease. It's going to be an ethnicity. And that's going to be the problem. If you have millions of people in this country who now have a relative or a friend or somebody who died because of the Chinese virus, you have all of the hate you need for whatever war you want. And this is what I'm really, really concerned about longer term, because I've seen over the last few weeks, especially with China, specifically the expelling of diplomats back and forth, and this kind of thing. I mean, again, this is the whole reason why I started this show and started doing this stuff, is because the world was in a teetering place, and we started to move some weird directions. And so I wanted to talk about it, to have a record of it as things went south. You have to understand, our economy is about to crater. And it's about to crater at a really bad time. Now, and this is not quite the virus, and this is some of the economic impacts of it, of what's going to happen. But you're going to see unemployment applications in the millions over the next few weeks. As these shutdowns, of course, anybody who can't, isn't essential or doesn't have that work from home capability, they're not going to be able to work. And anybody who's working in retail is not going to be able to work. And the demand for other kinds of jobs is going to go way down, and the demand for other types of good jobs is going to go way up. School shut, still able to go to the shops. Maximum, 3 individual items. Yeah, we had limits on milk when we went to the store the other day. So far, we've had one trip to the store so far. They haven't really kicked things up yet here. I'm hoping they can really do it soon. Yeah, not testing anyone. That's the same thing they're doing here, and they're not going to be testing stuff because they're so far beyond containment at this point that the testing becomes a little bit of a different approach to it. And we'll talk about that some more. Let me see. I can't see your whole comment here. Oh, there we go. Selling toilet rolls for 10 pounds a roll? You can actually just use the money, can't you, for roughly that? Yeah, not testing anyone who doesn't get admitted to hospital. Yeah, that's the same thing that we're seeing here, and this is why the numbers that you're seeing as far as the number of cases is way lower than what's out there, because again, it's not the people who are getting tested now are not people who are asymptomatic. Nobody is asymptomatic is getting tested, but we know that that happens a lot. And so this is where the idea, there's a couple competing things now, because I've seen a couple people say this, and this actually came up in my conversation with this person who wanted to travel across the country today, that the virus is already, quote, everywhere, right? It is in every community around the country, but not everybody has been exposed yet. And this is the very important thing to understand about that. We're seeing the numbers, and again, it's pretty across the board. You have a 15 to 20% hospitalization rate for anybody who gets it. So what we're trying to do now with all this social distance, and I know people who, my viewers, both of you know this and understand this, but the whole idea is to bring this down, and people just aren't getting it. It's not clicking because they're thinking, oh, it's everywhere already. It doesn't matter what I do, but it still does because of a number of things about the virus itself. And then, hey, we don't know that after you get it and you get better, that you won't get it again. And this is one of the things about, because there are a number of viruses I could tell you the names of. One that you might be familiar with is one called herpes, and that's a virus that comes back and it infects you, and then it comes back and we don't have a cure for it. Again, there's a number of other ones you know about, of course, the AIDS virus. There's another of other new ones that have come up. And there's another longer ones that have been around. So again, the way that we deal with these is to mitigate and vaccinate. And the time it's going to take to generate that vaccination is on that year scale. So to think about this economically, the way the president's been trying to do with doing these short-term fixes to help and bragging about what the stock market did yesterday and not thinking about what's it going to do over the next 6 months and a year, because none of the things that happen over the next few weeks are going to matter. Things are going to crater immensely. This is the president's Reichstag fire, and he's figured that out. And I think people need to understand now that the State Department today closed the borders around the world, don't go anywhere, and now that's who decides when they open back up and to where. And I think people need to understand that politically we're on a very precarious place right now. We're going to talk about that in a minute with the Democratic primary and what I want to see happen. But economically we're about to hit a huge recession. We have a $1 trillion deficit already. Our interest rates is now essentially zero, so there's no juicing to happen to get things started again. So we are looking at a long recession with little ability to stimulate ourselves without doing it, and next year we're looking at a deficit of probably, I'm guessing now, $2 to $2.5 trillion, which is a lot of money. Now, what money is going to do over the next little while is interesting. I did a little video on this because I don't doubt, we'll talk about this in a second, but we don't doubt that China will make a play to replace the U.S. as the world's economic leader if we get stuck here and they come out of it rolling. And that is what's looking like it might happen. When it first showed up in China and Wuhan, and they closed down the whole province to contain it and to track it and they went immediate draconian. That's very different than this piecemeal, state by state, I don't know, you guys do what you want kind of thing. It's a hoax. Oh, no, it's not a hoax. Oh, okay, well, shit. They took a very, very different approach than we have. And we're going to see how that plays out. Because they are two different, there was kind of a strategy to let this wave hit, right? To let herd immunity kick in, to have it be like a normal flu, to not try and test everyone, to not shut everything down. But then I think it became clear to the folks in the White House that that strategy was going to be extremely bad. And that's when I think they started to change it around. But I think they got kind of stuck, and they went halfway one way and halfway the other. Instead of trying to stick through that scene, now it's going to be bad, but they're going to try and blame it on other folks while claiming that they're doing everything. We'll see again in the next week. I just saw that the death toll for New York today was 20. The number of cases went up by 1,000. If that starts to roll like Italy has been, you're going to see that start to really kick in, and then some really dangerous stuff helping up this next week. You have to remember, the president claimed that this would largely blow over by April. So in 2 weeks from now, either I'm going to be, maybe I'm completely full of shit and I could be totally wrong about everything that I'm thinking or everything that I'm saying, and in 2 weeks, everything's fine and going back to normal. I don't think that's the case in the slightest. I think in 2 weeks, we're going to think, maybe in 2 months we can do it. I think that's where we're going to be in 2 weeks. So I'm just saying, everybody start to really chill out. This has been the first week of everybody's been at home. They've been trying to adjust to this, to what this new normal is going to feel like and be like for people who have decided that this is the new normal, which I'm very much there. And so this has been a tough week of adjustment for those folks. For folks who are thinking that this is going to be a short, quick battle and then we go back to normal, again, I could be totally wrong, but in a couple weeks I think you're going to see that that is not the case. That this is going to be a marathon of Mondays. So somebody mentioned the other day, it's like Monday every day, and that's kind of where we're at for a little while. Many of the followers, and this is what just blows me away, they had spring break, people were on the beaches in Florida up to yesterday for spring break. And that spreading of the virus is what's going to make this initial wave of cases so difficult to deal with. I'm going to talk a little bit about that wave, about what it is going on. I do think some of this trying to Oh yeah, actually that's where I'm at now. So what to expect when this wave hits? So the hospitals are where you're going to see it first, and this is where they're starting to build some hospitals in Seattle. This is why they're sending the ships up to New York. Because what happens with the virus, and let's go over this real quick on this alien invader novel coronavirus thing, right? So it's a coronavirus. There are other ones, right? We have them. We deal with them as humans a little bit. It's a type of virus. I'm not an expert on this, folks. This is all stuff that I'm learning this week in this last little while. But I can put it in a little bit of context for you. Why this is so difficult is because, again, this virus jumped from an animal to human and then changed and was able to then pass from human to human. So it is an alien virus to our species. Now, this is part of why the immune system response that we're getting is what's killing people. Because what happens is, and there's a cytokinian storm, it has to do with an immune system response in the lungs that basically blows out everything, and then other things that you've had can come in, and that's what's killing people. That's the pneumonia. And so this is why it's so difficult, and this is why it's an across-the-board kind of thing. All of these people... Yes, Italy passed China today in deaths, and that's absolutely the case. And it's because China immediately decided to take the economic hit, and Italy acted like it was the flu. And they spent weeks acting like it was the flu as it started to pile up. And you have to stop treating like that at least a couple weeks before then to try and cut this down. We're still accelerating on the cases that they're getting. And I want to be clear about that. The number of cases they're testing are only people who are going to hospitals or generally quite sick. Or if you have, you're a celebrity and you can order a test from overseas because they get lots of them in other places, apparently. But not a lot here because they wanted to keep the numbers down, so to speak. So then he could later brag about it. And I think the strategy was to let it happen, let it go, claim it was the flu. Just, it was a bad flu season, leave it at that. We'll keep going, stock market record high. And eventually, somewhere along the way, it became clear that that was not the case, and that was not what was going to happen. And so the tone changed immediately, and they also had to find a scapegoat. And you know what Donald's go-to is that, and that's the race-based division of people, and trying to brand this entire catastrophe as Chinese. And there's also some of that going after Xi Jinping and bringing in some of his own just failure to negotiate and win this trade war. Which, again, the war with China could be wildly more detrimental to the health of the planet than this virus, which should scare you a little bit more. So yeah, their ability, I talked about this, to weather the storm quicker, can upend the global monetary order. So this might lead to the recession that never ends for the U.S. And this is a scenario that I've been following for a little while. And we'll see over the next few weeks whether or not that's going to be something that's likely or possible. So to reiterate on all of that, things are going to be quite bad. I'm going to talk about a little bit more of that in a minute. This is a lot of ineptness that we've seen. A lot of the president's supporters don't think that this is going to happen and are not going to hold him responsible for when it does. You've seen 2 Republican senators who had foreknowledge of how bad this was going to be sell millions of dollars worth of stocks before the stock market crash. Just for history's sake, if you don't recall, in the last couple of weeks, the stock market has crashed tremendously and is below the point where it was when Donald took office. Every deal that they made with the devil to get the money is gone. It's evaporated. And it's not going to be back before November. He's going to do all sorts of lying about it, but it's gone. Those deals were gone. What did you get for it? So, the Democratic primary update. So this brings us to the next thing, November. What's going to happen there? So, Bernie hasn't dropped out yet. Bernie got shellacked in Florida, even with so the beaches were open, so voting happened fine. He lost by 40 points there. He lost every of this second round of primaries. But he's not dropping out. And there's not another primary for another 3 weeks. So we might have to have 3 weeks of Donald on TV every day, occasionally doing something right, and then getting praise for that overwhelmingly on conservative media. And then on the other side, we're going to have Biden have to continue to campaign against somebody he's already beaten. Yes, most of our antibiotics, and then people are going to be like, hey, let's order a bunch of ventilators, and China's going to be like, no, you can't have any. We're going to send them to Italy. Yes, picking a fight with China in the midst of a global pandemic is, again, not a good idea and not going to work very well. So Biden should be the presumptive nominee, and if he could act like it, that would help him tremendously come November. We would have a much more straightforward transition. If Bernie instead is going to spend another month of this, and this is the thing too, because of this pandemic, now Republicans are talking about sending cash to everybody and giving lots of benefits. And he's like, well, I've been saying that for years. But people are like, well, yeah, you were saying that when everything was fine, not as a response to a crisis. That's not the same. No, I was right. This is everything I've been always saying. And it's like, no. Stop, Bernie. We didn't pick you to fix this problem anyway. But now I'm afraid that he's not going to drop out. I really thought he was. And then I saw an email that he had sent out to his supporters. So I don't know what's going to happen there, and it's really unfortunate because I was really hoping it was really Tulsi dropped out. Tulsi dropped out of the race, right? But Bernie is still there. But I really wish he would stop and let Biden start to act like and start to build the shadow government that can come in and take over and help rebuild the country, because we are going to have to. If we rebuild it in Donald's image, it will fall apart nearly immediately. And it will be dumb and racist. Anyway, so understanding what we're seeing. So I ran the numbers again tonight from what they're posting as far as total cases in the U.S. They got a bunch of test kits in New York, so they got a lot of cases that showed up in New York. Based on the numbers that I'm just looking at, I'm seeing a doubling of every 2 to 3 days, right, for number of cases that they're reporting. So these are people in the hospital. So these are people who are already sick enough to have to go to a hospital, get tested. So we're seeing probably, 20, 30% of those are going to need intensive care. And that's, again, you're talking about. So I did the numbers on this before, or done some research, and there's like 100 to 130,000 intensive care beds potentially in the country. But if you're talking about that same kind of doubling every 2 to 3 days, we're already talking about 15,000, 13,000 cases, right? You take 10% of that, 15% of that, right? You've got, let's see, sorry, I don't know what I'm saying on the numbers. So we have 16,000 cases, 10%, 1,600, right? 15% is 2,400, right? 3 days, that's 48, 96, 20,000, 40,000, 80,000, 160,000. That's 6 3-day doubling periods. That's 3 weeks. Even looking at the numbers right now, in 3 weeks, all of the ICUs in the country will be filled. In 3 weeks, at the rate that we're going right now. People don't quite get this, and the math of exponential stuff, and this is at the very core of the model. When I talk about this model that I've built to help understand the universe and God and everything. But that exponential growth is the core of it. That's the whole idea. And people do not get the power of this. And there's a great illustration of this. If there's something, and in 30 days, right? Or you can do 90 days and do 3-day increments, right? Same difference. But in 30 periods, right, each period it doubles, right? I just told you the number of cases we're seeing doubles every 3 days. But each period it doubles, right? So if the whole country is going to be covered in 30 periods, how many periods until half the country is covered? And a lot of people don't get that because they're like, oh, okay, well, if it takes 30 days to cover the whole thing, then I guess, 15 days we'll have back halfway. No, and the answer is 29. It's the day before that half of that. And the day before that, it was only a quarter. And the day before that, it was around 10%. So a week before everybody had it, it was rare. And 3 weeks before it's everywhere and overwhelmed the country, it's almost rare. And that's the power of exponential growth. And that's what we're seeing right now. The math scares the ever-living shit out of me. And it's not, and there's some stuff of this too. We've moved beyond trying to contain it. And we're already moving to damage mitigation and racist scapegoating. So we're already just trying to contain the damage and blame somebody else for it. We're not even trying to do what South Korea was able to do, which was track and mitigate and control, right? And get these apps where you know where everybody's tested and test anybody and shut down and then try and... No, we're doing something very, very different from that. And in about 3 weeks, and I'll say right now, that was all head math, but I've seen some other stuff. But I think in about 3 weeks and a month, it's going to be really rough. And the problem with that, the math that I was talking about there, as these ICUs fill up, is that they've shown that if you can get somebody on a ventilator, even with the worst of this, that the mortality rate stays pretty reasonable. But if you can't, then it goes up tremendously, like 50%. And that in Italy, what they've had to do is, because the mortality rate stays very high, even for older people on ventilators, they've had to just say, no, you can't. We don't have enough. And so then the mortality rate jumps from this 3 or 4 or 15 that you've seen for older folks to 50 and 60. Understanding how math works has been like one of those, people didn't like me because I smashed the curve, but, I don't know if you remember that term from grade school. I was one of those people who blew away the curve, but this curve is what I'm talking about. My whole life, the understanding of everything about my conception of the way the universe works, it's all based on these curves and these exponential growth rates. It's real. It's how stuff happens. Now, they can also go the other way quickly. And maybe there's going to be that. But we're hitting a point where the seasons are changing, right? Today is the first day of spring. So now, if this can go down to the southern hemisphere and spend the summer down there and then come back, there's a decent chance that we're too big to even be noticed as alien life. The universe is actually run by viruses. So, accepting an apocalypse. This is something that I've written and talked about a lot over a long time, because it's one of those things, and it came from some of my interest of it started a little bit in college. And I wrote a paper, and it was the difference. I was looking at the difference of cultures reflected through art, through anime in this case. And it was one of the things about looking at some of the American cartoons versus some of the Japanese ones, and the difference, right? Looking at G.I. Joe was one of them. I wrote a paper about this in college. But the difference between a lot of the American stuff and a lot of, especially Japanese from the 80s and then early before, is an apocalypse. I mean, almost all of the Japanese, so much of it for a long time, it starts with the atom bomb going off. That's where it starts, right? So it's all this post-apocalyptic society. And there is a lot of, post-apocalyptic art here in the U.S., but America itself has never actually suffered through an apocalypse. Not one that was, a fully society-changing, destroying event where there's no question you got your ass kicked, no question that you got crushed, no question that you lost. Like just an abject defeat. And I'm not sure if facing a pandemic while running $1 trillion deficit that you haven't paid down with 0% interest rates is not the one thing that might lead directly to that. And to give you a little bit for it, I grew up I grew up Mormon in the church, and they have on their temple in Salt Lake City they have an angel up on top, and he's got a horn. And it's not, as many might think, it's not the angel Gabriel, who would be blowing his horn for the end of the world. But instead it's the angel Moroni who's supposed to blow his horn to tell people about stuff. But there was an earthquake the other day, right as this started to kick in, and that horn fell off. So if anybody is all in the slightest bit interested in kind of religious symbolism or things that are going on from that angle, and I'm very much, that's the way things, right, that's the way culture does it. And that's what I can't help but giggle a little bit at that. We are facing an American apocalypse right now. That's what I think. Again, in a few weeks we'll know whether or not I'm just completely ridiculous in my basement, right? And it's weird too, because I was driving the other day to work, and I was driving home, and I've got a beautiful drive home. Like I said, I live in Colorado, and there's a place, and you're driving down the valley, and you can see the whole mountains, and they're all laid out in front of you, and it was just, everything was just so normal. And the normalcy of it was, to me at that moment, just kind of overwhelming. And I'm not sure, because this is a thought that's happened to me a few times, but just so many people living such completely normal, unaffected lives. And just the overwhelmingness of it. And I don't know if this was right when I first started to hear about this coming out, and kind of to think about, what's going to happen if they all have to change? And what if they all have to change quickly? And we're seeing some of that now. And the transition is jarring, as those who both accept it and jump into it, and those who just deny that it's even there. It's wild to watch. It's been a week of just mind-blowing revelations. So one of the things that I kind of do, and I'm going to tell you this is a little bit, but this first started, and it was going on in Colorado, and I started getting a little bit of cough, and didn't ever really get much of a fever, but I saw how it's going. I was a smoker for 20 years, so, and I've seen news stories about folks like this, so, it's definitely around, and I have always been one to, how did I write this down? This is actually part of the book, but a big part of pragmatic realism as a philosophical movement is an acceptance of the inevitability of one's own death, to accept that the gift of life that we enjoy comes with the price of death that we all must pay. And you can't get around that. And it's one of those things that gives life value, because it makes it a finite thing that cycles through, and therefore it's not going to go on forever. So each moment does have that value. And one of the things that, as you get to look at this, I get to try to moderate my behavior, if I will, to think, if I don't get to have the true joy of my life, which is to see my children grow up, I'm going to try and treat them now like I might be dead in 2 weeks. Like I might get this virus, it might happen, and I might be gone. And being able to And I know that might sound really harsh or odd, but that's what I'm trying to think about and how I'm trying to treat them as we all spend so much time together. Was, if this is my last 2 weeks with you, how am I going to treat you? What can I do to help instill the values and the love that I have for you to help you take on this world that is now going to be so difficult? My kids, being homeschooled and having a snowstorm today, got to go and walk uphill in the snow to school as we walked around the block. They're going to be some tough-ass kids, that's what I'm saying. So, yeah, but and that's the point too. And you know, accepting that, you know, that death is an inevitable part and a price for life does not mean that you have to just quietly go with it. I mean, raging against that inevitability is not at all wrong, and fighting against it. And that will to live, I think, will matter for a lot of folks over the next little while. And I hope that we all have it and are ready to go and are ready for this fight, because it's going to be a long one. Oh, man. Indeed, it is that desire to see my children grown that might provide that extra needed will to take that extra breath that gives my lungs the chance to fight off the alien invader. It's a world that we're looking at. But I hope everyone out there stays safe and keeps sharing information. We're all in a lot of similar situations, and hopefully we can share this and come through it stronger. Always like to see that happen. It's going to be a ride, and I will say that with some confidence, but you'll see me again in a little while, and I will eat these pieces of paper if I'm wrong. I will flat out eat them, and I'll be happy about it. So, with that, I'm going to let you go tonight. I've been talking about this thing for the last few shows, and now it's going to be hard to... Maybe we'll stop. But yeah. That's why I started the show, to talk about this kind of stuff. Didn't think it'd be here this quick. But we'll see how long it's going to be with us. And how hard we're going to have to fight to escape dystopia. It's the name of the show. All right. Y'all have a good night. Thanks for dropping by. Everybody be safe. Share good information. And enjoy it. Treat everyone else like it's 2 weeks. Peace out.